Welcome back to the Constitutional Clarion. The Australian federal election on the 3rd of May 2025 returned the Albanese Labor government, and there will be a swearing-in ceremony this week for the new government. So I thought it was timely to explain the constitutional provisions and conventions concerning the formation of a government. First, there's the question of whether a new government needs to be formally sworn in at all, given that the same party and leader remain in power. Anthony Albanese was the Prime Minister before the election, and as his party appears to have secured majority support in the lower house, although admittedly the formal declaration of the polls has not yet occurred, it could continue in office with his existing ministry without any formal change. In practice, however, returning governments in Australia usually do go through a formal process of resignation and reappointment. This is done largely for symbolic purposes. It provides the public with visual images that show renewal and a fresh start. It allows ministers and their families to have a joyous occasion to celebrate their electoral success and their appointment to high office. The Prime Minister's resignation includes the resignation of the entire ministry. This takes care of the awkwardness of requiring the resignation of some ministers. Instead, all are removed, creating a clean slate. When the Prime Minister is reappointed, he or she then advises the Governor-General on who to appoint and to which ministerial office. This way, the Prime Minister can control who comprises the ministry, the portfolios they receive, and the order of their seniority. On the political side, however, there may be constraints on how this is done. For example, under Labor, it's commonly been the case that the caucus, through its various factions, agrees on who is appointed to the ministry, leaving the allocation of portfolios to the Prime Minister. This has the rather unfortunate consequence that sometimes the most competent people are left out because they are not favoured by factional warlords, and we end up with less capable ministers. What does the Constitution, however, have to say about ministerial appointment? Section 64 of the Constitution says that the Governor-General may appoint officers to administer Commonwealth departments. Who are those officers? Well, Section 64 goes on to say that they shall be members of the Federal Executive Council and shall be the Sovereign's Ministers of State for the Commonwealth. What this provision really does then is allow the Governor-General to appoint ministers to administer government departments. The High Court has held that more than one minister may administer a particular department. Section 64 then says that no Minister of State shall hold office for a longer period than 3 months unless he is or becomes a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. This is important because it formally ties the executive government to Parliament. It gives a grace period of 3 months for a person to become a member of Parliament, but if they remain outside Parliament, then their appointment as a minister is automatically terminated at the end of that 3-month period. For example, if the coalition had won the 2025 election, but its leader, Mr. Dutton, had lost his seat, he could still have been appointed as Prime Minister if, for example, he found a backbencher who was prepared to resign so that Dutton could run for the seat in a by-election before the 3 months was up. If, however, he'd lost that by-election and was not a Member of Parliament by the time the 3 months expired, his appointment as Prime Minister would terminate. Another relevant section is Section 62 of the Constitution. It provides for the existence of the Federal Executive Council to advise the Governor-General and says that the members of the Council shall be chosen and summoned by the Governor-General and sworn as Executive Councillors. It's necessary for a person to be sworn in as an Executive Councillor first before he or she can be appointed as a Minister under Section 64. At the federal level, executive councillors continue to hold office once sworn in, even after they've left office as ministers, if their party is no longer in government, for example. In practice, only the executive councillors of the current government are called upon to advise the Governor-General at any time. This means that those who have been sworn in as executive councillors in the past, such as Anthony Albanese and all his ministers from the last government, are not sworn in again as executive councillors. Hence, if you watch the swearing-in ceremony, which is going to happen this week, you'll see that a small number of people who have never held ministerial office before are sworn in first as executive councillors, while the others do not take that oath because they've already been sworn in as executive councillors in the past. The other relevant constitutional provision is section 65. It says that until the Parliament otherwise provides, the ministers of state shall not exceed 7 in number and shall hold such offices as the Parliament prescribes, or, in the absence of provision, as the Governor-General directs. Now, in this case, the Parliament has otherwise provided, at least in relation to the number of ministers. Section 4 of the Ministers of State Act, 1952, says that the number of ministers must not exceed 30 and the number of parliamentary secretaries, who are also designated as ministers for legal reasons, must not exceed 12. Parliament has not, however, prescribed the offices to be held by ministers, so it's the Governor-General who directs that a minister shall hold a particular office, such as the office of Attorney-General or Minister for Defence or Treasurer. That's what the text of the Constitution says, but it's also predicated upon the underlying conventions of responsible government. The way this works is that, according to convention, the Governor-General appoints the person who commands, or is most likely to command, the confidence of the lower house. In this case, Mr Albanese leads the Labor Party, and the Labor Party appears to have won a majority of seats in the lower house. In this case, as Mr Albanese leads the Labor Party, and that is the party that appears to have won a majority of seats in the lower house, then after Mr Albanese formally resigns, the Governor-General will, according to convention, reappoint him as Prime Minister because he seems to be the one who is most likely to be able to command the confidence, that is the support, of the lower house. The Governor-General then, according to convention, makes any necessary appointments to the Federal Executive Council upon the advice of the Prime Minister. Next, the Governor-General appoints ministers to particular offices under section 65 and to administer particular departments under section 64. This is also done by convention on the advice of the Prime Minister. It's important to understand the difference between being appointed to a particular office and being able to administer a department. Some ministers have responsibilities that fall within their office but concern parts of legislation that are administered by a different department. For example, if you look at this old 2024 instrument, which is registered as a notifiable instrument on the Federal Register of Legislation, it says that Katie Gallagher is the Minister for Finance, that's the office that she holds, and can administer the Department of Finance. Well, that makes sense. But it also says that she holds the office of Minister for the Public Service and Minister for Women. And for that reason, she's appointed to administer the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet because those subject areas are administered by parts of that department. Now, this does not make Katie Gallagher Prime Minister, even though she can administer the Prime Minister's department. The final thing to talk about here is oaths and affirmations. Why? Well, because every time a new government is sworn in, the usual suspects pop up on the internet saying that, oh no, these ministers swore the wrong oath, not the one in the Constitution, so it's all invalid. Look, this is complete and utter rubbish, but let me explain why. Section 42 of the Constitution says that every senator and member of the House of Representatives shall, before taking his seat, make and subscribe before the Governor-General or some person authorised by him an oath or affirmation of allegiance in the form set out in the schedule to the Constitution. That oath or affirmation says that the person will be faithful and bear true allegiance to whoever is the current monarch, so in this case King Charles III, his heirs and successors according to law. That oath is made by senators and members of parliament when they are sworn in as parliamentarians after the election. So that will happen when Parliament sits for the first time after this election. Yes, every elected member of Parliament and every senator, including the Prime Minister and all the ministers, do take that oath or affirmation when they take up their seat in Parliament. But because it's not shown on television, it's a rather boring thing to televise, the oath-obsessed eccentrics out there seem to believe that it doesn't happen. But it does, and if you scour the internet, you usually can find the parliamentary recording of the various senators and members doing that. In fact, they usually do it in batches of around 4 or 6 of them, so it's faster to get through the list. That oath or affirmation in the schedule to the Constitution is not prescribed as the one to be taken by executive councillors. While the Constitution refers to executive councillors as being sworn, it does not specify the terms of any oath. From the very beginning of Federation, that oath has been different to the oath of allegiance that's taken by members of Parliament. The oath taken by Edmund Barton, when he was sworn in 1901 as an executive councillor, was an oath to advise the Governor-General to the best of his judgment and consistently with the good management of the public affairs of the Commonwealth of Australia, and also not to disclose the confidential deliberations of the Executive Council. Barton was one of the primary framers of the Constitution, so he can be expected to have known that the Executive Council oath was intended to be different from the parliamentary oath of allegiance. The form of the Executive Council oath that's used today is actually very similar to the one taken by Barton, but with a little bit of updating of the wording. Finally, there is the ministerial oath. There's no constitutional requirement that an oath or affirmation be made in order to be a minister at all. It's done on a discretionary basis to add to the gravity and importance of the occasion. The terms of the oath are whatever the government of the day chooses to put in it. It has changed from time to time, and those changes do not in any way invalidate ministerial appointments, particularly as no oath is legally required at all to be appointed as a minister. The most recent version of that oath has been for the ministers to say that they will well and truly serve the Commonwealth of Australia, her land and her people in the office of minister for whatever it is. Again, the parliamentary oath set out in the schedule has never been used as the ministerial oath, so those people who rail against the validity of current ministers on that basis would also have to accept that Sir Robert Menzies was invalidly appointed as Prime Minister, along with every Prime Minister and every minister since Federation in 1901, including the ones who had been involved in writing the Constitution. Having said that, they'd probably rather enjoy making that argument, but in the real world, these arguments are regarded as complete and utter nonsense. Thank you for watching the Constitutional Clarion. Hopefully, if you do see the new government being sworn in, you will now have a better understanding of what oaths they take and why. And as always, I look forward to seeing you again next time. Goodbye.